We have a lot to talk about from Dynamite, but obviously the prevailing story will be the one involving Sammy Guevara and Andrade. That I cannot say I'm stunned that we are sitting here discussing this way. In some ways I am, but in others, I mean, this was largely telegraphed over the last couple of days to the point of like basically saying, "Well, I'll see you on Wednesday," and in many ways it blows my mind that it got to this point when it was so outlined by these two, and we'll do a whole recap of the story. But my major takeaway, this one was very preventable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Should we get into it now, or do you want to wait?
I think let's start off the top with that. We will get into the rest afterward. But, you know, on Monday, I had gotten some highlights of the Andrade interview that he had done with Mas Lucha. But because the interview had been in Spanish, and sometimes things are lost in translation or context, I didn't want to necessarily focus too much on it Monday because I didn't have a time to really go into it. But on Tuesday, like, you could certainly see what the context was. You know, speaking a lot about you know, his relationship with Triple A and other problems, but I guess the major story was discussing an incident with Sammy Guevara that occurred after they had a match, and Sammy Guevara allegedly complained to him in the locker room afterwards that he hit him too hard, and Andrade named Sammy, and quickly afterwards, you saw Sammy put out kind of this not so veiled tweet. What did he call him? Like a favor hire, and calling him a bitch. And it went back and forth, but you can see some of the highlights here. Andrade stating, "I said it to your face. If you had a problem with me and you said nothing, I won't beat your ass because I'm a professional. Don't be scared. When I say something, I name names, and I'm not scared to get fired." Guevara quote tweeted that, "You didn't say shit to me, you liar, but here's some truth, you ungrateful prick. You would be jobless if it wasn't for your dad-in-law. And are you really mad at me or mad at yourself for failing to get over for a second time? Just go back to WWE like we all know you want to and fuck off." And it ended with Andrade, "Okay, I'm a liar. See you on Wednesday. I'll tell you to your face again, and nothing you say that you do not have any problem." And that is how that ended. So how these two got into close proximity enough on Wednesday is mind-boggling, given this is the premise of their week and what was leading up to this. So, you know, within less than an hour before Dynamite, we see Tony Khan tweet out that the match for Rampage between Preston Vance and Andrade, the Mask versus Andrade's AEW career, is now off, and in its place will be the Dark Order challenging Death Triangle for the Trios titles. And certainly people were at least assuming some fallout of this incident has occurred where Andrade is now off this show on Friday. But then, just as Dynamite was about to go live, TMZ Sports reported that Sammy Guevara and Andrade were involved in a backstage altercation with Andrade being sent home. The site reports, "We're told the incident happened backstage at a Dynamite show at the Entertainment and Sports Arena in Washington, D.C. Wednesday night. Sources tell us words were exchanged and then things turned physical. Sammy allegedly pushed Andrade and punches were thrown, according to our sources. It's unclear if anyone was hit. Our sources are adamant the altercation was not part of an AEW storyline." That's one thing in all of this way, is that I feel by this point, at least my Twitter timeline, it's no longer the, "Oh, it's a work default." It's, no, odds are this actually happened, and there's nobody playing conspiracy theory anymore when it comes to these incidents. As for the reason for the fight, the guys have been in an intense beef that spilled over on social media. On Tuesday, they went back and forth. Our sources say several wrestlers are pissed at Sammy for publicly airing personal and private issues, and things just boiled over at the arena. And Andrade did tweet out a message that read, "Respect me and I'll respect you." So Andrade is sent home, but curiously, Sammy was not. He was all over the show tonight. And I will say that whatever was going on with him, it certainly didn't affect his performance in the main event, because he went balls out in that match, and resulted in
it might have added to it, John. You know,
well, the heat from the crowd. I mean, you could hear the Idolo chants, and "you still suck," even when he did some impressive feats. he had a hell of a performance in that main event. So this only pushed him forward in that regard. There was certainly no evidence of this affecting his performance. And to your point, it might have even enhanced it. But just another mess way in a long line of them. And again, you go back to our show after All Out or discussing the fallout of all of that. My big takeaway was this was something that it should have never gotten to that point. When CM Punk is going on live television and just throwing down shoot gauntlets for guys to challenge, that's the point where, okay, we're destroying this problem now before it grows because it's gotten too big. It never should have gotten to that press conference. Never should have gotten to this. Same deal here. You had all of this online for everyone to see. Your average fan would have realized, wow, there is some tension here, and this better be on high alert on Wednesday. Like, there is a potential issue, especially in what has been a contentious locker room environment that we have been privy to see the fallout from. So the idea that these guys even got close enough to each other that something could get physical is, to me, that is the largest question here. And that's not to excuse the behavior of either of these two. These are adults at the same time, and you can place blame. But AEW's conclusion was sending one home and not the other, regardless of, how you want to view this. And there are aspects that we are not privy to. But, one was in the main event on that show. But at the same time, like, we look at the backstage incident and All Out, they sent the producers home that were like trying to break, like, everybody was sent home after that. So a lot of questions that come out of this. And again, just a continued pattern for AEW as they have been trying to put a much more positive spin on the locker room post All Out.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I mean, the fact that this is occurring on the 3rd anniversary, and on National Scissoring Day, no less, a day of celebration, is really, really unfortunate. We're talking about a company that I think is still in the midst of, some negative PR. You wrote a big piece today, John, about, just the public's changing opinions about AEW. And for something like this to happen so publicly throughout the week leading up to the day of the show, and this story breaking, is an embarrassment for a professional company. And it's just sad. And beyond that, it's hard to speak about the specifics without knowing anything more than, hey, like an altercation occurred. We don't know if even the punch is connected, but not to say that even matters. The fact that it even escalated to any sort of physical altercation or the possibility of physical altercation calls into question so much of, I think, whatever talent relations team is currently in place in the company. What sort of protocols exist when people get into online disagreements or just, behind the scenes disagreements, and what sort of conflict resolution systems might be in place. And obviously, whatever has been in place didn't work tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's, these two, like, imagine just for anyone that's listening to this, that if you went to your place of business and this was how you handled yourself and feeling that you could go ahead and do this, like calling it out and then executing these actions. Like, obviously there's a lot of, pride and ego involved in this, the way this worked out publicly over the last couple of days, and you're going to have that testosterone. But And again, I'm not excusing these two, but there's a structural issue in place as well here that is supposed to prevent these issues. You can't prevent everything from happening. You can't always police a locker room, but this was one where it was literally telegraphed earlier this week. I will see you on Wednesday. That is at least enough of a concern that we need to be prepared here. And it's resulted in one person being sent home and, another that, public sentiment will have an argument whether they should have been sent home as well, just for their being directly involved in all of this. But I did write quite a bit today just about the attitude of AEW, the perception that a lot of that press conference has had with people because of the public nature of it, and it just comes down to, at a certain point, of Tony Khan putting his foot down and you are free to say whatever you want when you're out there. But if you bring embarrassment onto me and my company, that's where there's going to be a zero tolerance policy. So you think about what kind of actions you're going to carry out, because when I'm out doing promotion for this company, for these big shows, and I've got to spend 5 minutes avoiding questions about the latest backstage incident, that's 5 minutes I don't have to promote my next event. When I send Chris Jericho out for our Canadian debut next week, and he's got to be answering questions about Sammy Guevara instead of promoting a match with Bryan Danielson, you are doing harm to the company by us having to constantly put out these fires. And you are not going to be fired. You're going to just sit, and that will be, you're under contract. And this is not going to be a friendly environment where you feel you can just show up at work and get into altercations with people, or commandeer press conferences, or shoot your own angles on television. Like, this is just, to me, we're past the breaking point, and you can bury your head in the sand and state, oh, this is just a small incident. We can make money off of this. This is great for pro wrestling. I disagree. I don't think that the legitimate issues that we had with Eddie Kingston and Sammy Guevara enhanced that match in any way, shape, or form a few weeks ago. In certain cases, yes, it can work in professional wrestling. The real issues draw money slogan, like, there's a reason that is a mantra. But to me, this is two heels that we're not going to make any money off of this with. It's just further embarrassment to the company. And to your point, Wai, here on our anniversary night, people's attention was greatly, I think, taken away from the action on screen and more concerned about the action behind the scenes and what was going on, and just the latest in an ongoing story with AEW.
Yeah. So much of this, unfortunately seems to undo, I think, some of the positive momentum that AEW was starting to build back after All Out. We heard about a talent meeting, very much led by, some of the veterans in the locker room, and Jon Moxley, Chris Jericho, and Bryan Danielson. And from at least reports, it seems like morale in the locker room was very much changed and much better. And I have to imagine, like, this was, a real blow to everybody back there who's been working so hard to try to, rebuild the image of this company following a very, incredibly embarrassing story involving CM Punk and the Elite. So, this is something that I think we're all looking for Tony Khan specifically, not just the veterans that he's employed in the locker room, but Tony Khan specifically to handle and to show the public that he's capable of handling proper punishment for people involved in this. Again, I don't know the specifics of the incident itself, but I think the public wants to see him specifically speak about it and to take action, for us to feel confident, for the audience to feel confident that he's capable of leading, an industry full of a lot of, high strung egos. That's a given. It's a very competitive industry, but stuff like these Twitter beefs are just, it's embarrassing for all involved.
It does. I think it's just an embarrassment to the company of just this happening continually, and especially during this period, as you mentioned, where I think there's been a concerted effort to put on a front of a positive locker room, and I'm sure that there are many people in that locker room who are just as upset as anyone else of this happening, and how it reflects badly on others that are trying to lead forward during, I don't know if you want to call this like a difficult time for AEW, but it's a transition. It's, you're seeing some of these markets and some softness when tickets are going on sale, and, the buzz that it's hard to quantify, but you can sense that, that has evaporated to a degree over to WWE. And at times that brings out a lot of stress, and AEW has not been in this kind of a position during their 3 years, where it's kind of regrouping and figuring out what their next step is going to be. And you either look at these problems and you come up with excuses, or you look at root causes and what needs to, what adjustments you need to make, and how much you're piling onto your plate, like what your priorities are when we're looking at, Ring of Honor and how important that is, and Rampage, and you're looking at these different markets. Like there is so much on their plate. What are the priorities to make this company as strong as possible going into these negotiations?
Yeah. I think heading into this year, we all recognize that it's an incredibly competitive marketplace between the WWE, and if you're in AEW trying to, break and get into any sort of like race with the behemoth that is the WWE. But I don't know if any of us like foresaw so much internal strife from AEW within that, like, at this point seems to be its biggest PR undoing, at least, so it seems like they have a lot of issues from within that they have to fix before even, considering so many of these other things that are on Tony Khan's plate.
Yeah. And I mean, like, let's not forget the fact, like, how fast this story was public too. I mean, that was, a very, very quick turnaround as well, that this story got out there. So anyway, I'm sure we will be discussing this more, and I'm sure it'll come up in the show itself and the feedback as well.